Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you powerful tales of personal growth, resilience, and the pursuit of dreams. Today, we dive into the journey of Madison Carter, a woman who fought against the odds to prove her worth in a world that tried to keep her in the shadows. Despite her achievements and determination, Madison faced rejection from her family, who didn't see her potential. This is a story about breaking free from the constraints of others' expectations, finding strength in your own abilities, and stepping into a future that is truly your own. Subscribe to the channel to begin today's story. I remember the moment clearly. Even now, years later, I stood in front of my father's massive oak desk, my hands trembling by my sides. But I refused to let him see how shaken I truly was. I had spent my entire life proving myself to him. And yet, here I was, facing his indifference. It was as if nothing I had done mattered. I had worked so hard to get here, to show him that I was capable of taking over the firm that bore his name, capable of leading, capable of everything he had taught me to be. But instead of pride in his eyes, I saw coldness, disappointment, and a touch of something deeper, something that hurt even more than rejection, resignation. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "you can't be serious." He didn't even flinch. His cold blue eyes met mine. But there was no warmth in them. No fatherly affection. Only a hint of exhaustion. He leaned back in his leather chair, exhaling a long, slow breath, the smoke from his cigar curling into the air like the words he refused to say. "This is not up for discussion, Madison," he replied, his voice steady and unwavering. He flicked his cigar into the ashtray with practiced precision, as if signaling that the conversation was already over. And just like that, my heart sank. I clenched my fists at my sides, the anger rising like a tidal wave. But I forced myself to breathe, to calm the storm within me. As I held his gaze, "So that's it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the tears threatening to spill. "You'd rather hand everything over to Jake, someone who doesn't even care, than let me prove myself? All because I'm a woman?" He didn't flinch, not even an inch. "This firm is for your brother to manage, Madison," he said again, the words so final, so absolute. "You've done well with your education. You've worked hard. You'll make a fine wife one day. But this is not your place." I stared at him, the words stinging, cutting through everything I had worked for. All the years spent in Harvard. All the late nights reading case law. All the hours spent arguing, learning, excelling. All of it meant nothing because I was born a woman. I was supposed to fit into some neat little box, marry well, and support the family legacy in a way that had nothing to do with leading or creating. My place, it seemed, was to stand in the background, just as I had always been expected to. I took a deep breath, and despite the fury rising in my chest, I kept my voice steady. "Dad, Jake doesn't care about this firm. He's reckless. He barely scraped through community college. And he has no idea how to run a business. You know that." My father rubbed his temple, and I could see the familiar irritation flicker in his eyes. He was a man used to having everything under control, used to making the decisions that affected so many lives. But this was different. This was me standing up, fighting for what I had earned. "Jake will learn," he said, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. "He's my son, Madison. It's his birthright to take over Mercer and Associates." And then, just when I thought it couldn't hurt more, he said something that made my stomach twist. "You, Madison." His voice softened, but the pity in it was worse than any insult. "You have other options. A future that doesn't involve the stress of running a firm. I'm protecting you." Protecting me? Was that what this was? Protecting me from what? From the challenge of proving myself? From living a life that wasn't just tied to my father's name? His words felt like a slap to my face. And before I could stop myself, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Protecting me?" I asked, my voice incredulous. "You're not protecting me, Dad. You're holding me back. I've worked harder than anyone, including Jake, and you won't even give me a chance. Because you're too stuck in your ways to see what I'm capable of." The words hung in the air for a moment. Too raw, too real. I could see the hardness in his eyes now. A father who had made his decision. Who had already written the script for my life. And no matter how many times I fought against it, he wouldn't change. That's enough. Madison, he said, his voice sharp now, cutting through the silence. We're done here. I stormed out of his office, my heels echoing against the cold marble floors of the family estate. I couldn't stop the tears that burned my eyes as I passed the familiar portraits of our ancestors. Of men who had built this empire. Of men who would never understand. My mother was in the parlor when I passed. She was quietly arranging flowers in a vase. A soft, almost sad expression on her face. She looked up as I passed. Her eyes filled with the same quiet resignation I had seen in so many of her actions over the years. Madison, she said, her voice gentle, almost fearful. What happened? I stopped, my heart heavy with frustration and pain. He won't let me work at the firm, I said, my voice breaking as I spoke. He's handing everything over to Jake, and he expects me to just smile and accept it. My mother sighed, a deep, tired sound that seemed to carry years of unspoken words. She didn't even look at me, just continued arranging the flowers. Your father, he has his ways, she said, her voice hesitant. But maybe it's best not to push him. Dear, he means well. I stared at her, stunned. Means well? I repeated, my voice shaking. Mom, he's throwing away everything I've worked for just because I'm a woman. How can you stand there and defend that? She lowered her gaze, and for the first time, I saw the years of quiet submission etched into her face. I just don't want to see you hurt. Madison, she said softly, her voice full of the kind of pain that only a mother could know. Sometimes it's easier to let things be. Her words hung in the air, and I felt a sharp pang in my chest. She wasn't wrong. I could see it in her eyes, the years of quiet compromise. The life of living in the shadow of someone else's dreams. But I couldn't do that. Not anymore. I turned away, my heart heavy, but my resolve stronger than ever. It was clear now. I was on my own. And I would find my own path. Whether they supported me or not. The decision to leave was not an easy one. I had always been someone who valued family. Who believed in loyalty. Who thought that at the end of the day, blood should mean something. But the more I thought about my father's words, the more I realized that the legacy he was offering me was one that came with shackles. The idea of living my life as someone's quiet shadow, being given only what others deemed appropriate for me, always under the watchful eye of tradition and expectations, it was suffocating. I was suffocating. The night I made my decision, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling of my room. The weight of everything pressed down on me. I thought about my years at Harvard, my late nights studying, the countless hours spent pushing myself to be the best, to be enough. I had done everything right. I had excelled. I had fought for every ounce of respect I received. And yet, none of it had mattered to my father. None of it was ever going to be enough unless I was born a man. And that realization hurt in a way I couldn't describe. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was hurt. Deeply hurt. For all the sacrifices I had made. For all the dreams I had held onto. It seemed that they were just, not meant to be. But as much as it stung, there was also a fire inside me that refused to die. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I couldn't. I had worked too hard to simply give up. So, I packed my suitcase the next morning. The sound of my suitcase wheels rolling over the hardwood floor seemed to echo through the quiet house. I couldn't remember a time when it had felt so still, so empty. I hadn't spoken to my father or my brother yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they found out. My mother, of course, was still asleep, blissfully unaware of what was happening. As I zipped up the final compartment of my suitcase, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. But it quickly disappeared. What was I supposed to do? Stay? Pretend everything was fine? I had spent my whole life being second to my brother. Being told what I could and couldn't do. And I wasn't going to let that continue. The door to my bedroom creaked open as I was standing by the window, staring out into the garden below. My mother stood in the doorway. Her expression pale, confusion written across her face. Madison, what are you doing? Her voice wavered, a mixture of concern and fear. It broke me, but I had made my decision. I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to stay composed. I'm leaving, Mom, since I'm not welcome at the firm and I apparently don't belong in this family's plans. I'm going to find a place where I do. Her face faltered, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. Catherine, please, don't do this. Let's talk about this. But it was too late. The words had already been said. The decision had already been made. Behind her, my father appeared in the doorway. His expression was hard, and I could see the irritation in his eyes. What's all this? He demanded. Where do you think you're going? Grant's showing up at the office for a vacation. Huh? I snapped, unable to stop myself. Grant, my brother, leaned casually against the doorframe, wearing his usual smug smile. He was unbothered, unaffected by what was happening. For him, this was just another piece of the family drama that had always revolved around me. But not anymore. You think I'm throwing a tantrum? I asked, my voice steady now, though there was anger simmering beneath it. I'm not throwing a tantrum, Jake. This is me taking control of my life. Something you've never had to do because everything's always been handed to you. My father raised a hand, silencing us both. Enough, he said sharply. Madison, you're not leaving. You belong here, with your family. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. No, Dad, I belong somewhere I'm valued. And clearly, that's not here. I picked up my suitcase and turned to leave. There was nothing else to say. My mother called after me, her voice trembling. Catherine, please don't go. We can work this out. We'll talk. You don't have to do this. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. There was no going back from this. No more pretending that everything would magically get better if I just stayed and played by their rules. I couldn't keep sacrificing my dreams and ambitions to fit into a mold they had created for me. As I walked down the grand staircase, I could hear my mother's soft sobs from behind me. But I didn't turn around. There was a finality in my steps that I could not ignore. The door at the end of the hallway was open, and I stepped through it, the cool morning air greeting me as I left the house behind. For the first time in my life, I felt free, but there was still a part of me that wondered if I was making a mistake. Would I regret this decision? Would my family ever forgive me? I didn't know. I only knew that I couldn't stay. Not under these conditions. Not anymore. I was ready to prove myself on my own terms. And for the first time, I was taking that first step toward my future. The next few days were a blur. Leaving my family behind was harder than I had anticipated. But there was something liberating about it, too. For the first time, I wasn't someone's daughter or sister. I was just Madison Carter. An individual trying to carve out her own path. No more living under the weight of expectations. No more struggling for a place where I never seemed to fit. I spent the first night in a small, minimalist apartment in the city. A stark contrast to the mansion I had just walked away from. The air felt different here. Fresh and filled with possibility. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, trying to push away the doubts that crept in at the edges of my mind. I had done the right thing. Hadn't I? I had chosen to leave a place that didn't value me, that saw me only as a tool to uphold their legacy. And I had taken control of my future. But, even with all that, it was still hard. There were moments, especially at night, when I would find myself wishing that I didn't have to make this choice. I missed the comfort of knowing where I stood in the world. Even if that place was one where I didn't truly belong. I missed my mother's soft voice. Even though she had never stood up for me. I even missed the chaotic presence of Grant. Annoying as he was, the silence in the apartment felt too heavy. Too unfamiliar. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to shake off the weight of doubt. I had a plan. I had always been someone with a plan. And right now, that plan was to find a new job, one where I would be respected for my skills. Not my last name. My phone buzzed as I sat at the small breakfast table. A message from an old professor at Harvard. It was an invitation for an interview at one of the top law firms in New York City. I didn't even hesitate. I set up the interview for the following week. I spent the next few days preparing for the meeting, diving into case law and reading through the firm's history. I wasn't going to walk in there and be treated as anything less than the capable, hard-working woman I knew I was. The idea of working for a firm that wasn't tied to my family's name was a breath of fresh air. It felt like I was building something entirely on my own, without anyone's shadow looming over me. The interview day arrived, and I felt both excited and terrified. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my suit, trying to steady my racing heart. For the first time, I wasn't walking into a room where I was someone's daughter. I was just another lawyer trying to prove herself. It was empowering, but it was also intimidating. What if they didn't see my potential? What if I failed? The moment I walked into the sleek, modern office, all my nerves seemed to dissipate. The team that greeted me was welcoming, but there was no false pretension. It was clear they cared about one thing: my ability to do the job. For the first time in years, I wasn't being compared to anyone. I wasn't the daughter of Robert Carter. I wasn't anyone's sister. I was Madison Carter, a Harvard graduate with a passion for the law and a fierce determination to succeed. The interview went better than I could have hoped. The partners were impressed by my credentials, my background, and most importantly, my drive. They didn't care about my last name. They cared about what I could bring to the table. When I walked out of that office an hour later, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. 2 days later, I received an offer from the firm. I remember sitting on my small couch, the letter in my hands. As the weight of it all sank in, I had done it. I had proved myself. I wasn't just Robert Carter's daughter anymore. I was Madison Carter, an attorney with her own future to shape. The offer was everything I needed: freedom, opportunity, and a fresh start. I walked into the firm on my first day with a sense of purpose I hadn't known I was capable of. The office was bustling with energy, filled with smart, driven people who respected each other's talents. I was placed with a senior attorney, Richard Hayes, who was a sharp and modern man. He immediately saw my potential and encouraged me to take on more responsibility. It was everything I had ever wanted, everything I had dreamed of. I wasn't just another face in the crowd. I was being valued for what I could do. The work was challenging, but it felt rewarding in a way that no job had ever felt before. I wasn't working to earn approval from anyone. I was working because I believed in what I was doing. The cases were tough, but each victory felt like another brick in the foundation I was building for myself. I thrived in an environment where my thoughts and ideas were respected. No one was looking at me and thinking about who my father was. They were looking at me and seeing a talented lawyer. For the first time in my life, I was where I belonged. But as fulfilling as my professional life was becoming, there was still an ache inside me. Every so often, I would think of my family, the silent moments, the conversations I'd never had with my father. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I had done what I needed to do, but the emotional toll of leaving them behind was still there. It was something I couldn't shake. No matter how much I excelled at work, there were moments when I wished things had been different. But I couldn't change the past. I could only move forward. And forward, I was going. I knew that now. As the months went by, my life continued to unfold in ways I had never imagined. The work was demanding, but it was fulfilling in a way I had never known. I was no longer just Madison Carter, the daughter of Robert Carter. I was a respected lawyer, a professional who had earned her place through hard work and determination. The respect I received from my colleagues, the clients I helped, and even the confidence I gained in myself, these were things I had been chasing my entire life. And now, for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. But despite all of my success, there were still moments when I thought of my family. I missed my mother's voice. Even though she had never stood up for me, I thought of my father, the man who had always been so sure of everything, and wondered if he ever regretted his decision. Would he ever realize what he had lost by pushing me away? One afternoon, I got a call from the firm. They had a big case lined up, one that would put me in the spotlight. I was ready. I knew what I was capable of. And when I stepped into that courtroom, I didn't just see myself as a lawyer. I saw the culmination of everything I had fought for. For the first time, I wasn't just fighting for my future, I was fighting for myself. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more life-changing moments, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us, and it ensures that we can continue sharing these inspiring stories with you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.